Welcome to session number 5 this week. Actually, we're on now to the British Computer Society Service Management ITAM Specialist Group Conference. This year, our conference theme is the digital workplace revolution, and part of that is in relation to the impacts that we've been having in relation to having a pandemic occur this year, and it's pushing people back into the home for digital working and working from home and all these cool things that hopefully we can keep. So a lot of our conference is going to draw out some of those themes and conversations, and certainly on the panel discussion that we have on Wednesday, we're going to try and pull some of those themes together and really dig into, what do we need to do to keep the good things that we've actually got as a result of, this changes that have occurred this year. And obviously we had Monday morning Duncan talking about the employee experience of this, and he'll be back joining us on that panel discussion on Wednesday evening. So just a little bit about the BCS specialist group that we are. We're a combination now since our recent merger in December with the service management group. And previously we were the configuration management specialist group, which also hosted the SAM group. So we're quite a broad remit now across lots of the ITIL functions. And so we bring you lots of presentations from professionals and experts and networking events across all of these threads throughout the year. Generally, we have a monthly meeting where we invite a presenter in, who maybe one or two, depending on the types of session that we have in the evening, to talk about whatever the hot topics are that our members want. And so feel free to contact us if you would like to join us at our specialist group, or also be a presenter at one of our events. Our events are all online at the moment, obviously, because we can't do face-to-face events. And the beauty of this event this year being an online conference, which is the first one we've done online, is that we have had international presenters and international guests. And that's, I think, one of the really great things that we're loving about having these online presences, even for the sessions that we've run at the beginning of the year that were just our regular monthly meetings. Not so easy on the networking side because we're not face-to-face, but hopefully we'll get some of that back soon. And be able to bring you together next year, perhaps for certain events, but we'll see how that all pans out. So we are a volunteer group, and Kylie's just going to post up some of the links for you on how you can connect with us. The connection information is actually available on the website that we have the conference information on the About page. You can find a link there to the BCS group webpage, the LinkedIn Service Management ITAM Specialist Group page that we post information on. And there's also an email address where you can write to us if you would like to join and become a member of our group. So just a few notes about where we are at the moment. We had a keynote presented by Claire Agata last week, who it was pre-recorded and we released it on Thursday, which is the thread for all of this change that we're experiencing this year. And Claire will be back with us on the panel. Equally, Jonathan was with us on the panel on Wednesday as well. And so just a few quick things. If you haven't caught up with that keynote, do find it from the links that are on the web page or on LinkedIn, and watch that before we have the questions with the panel on Wednesday. There are a few more sessions. We've got today we've got Jonathan speaking now on full stack outsourcing, and then we're going to have Desiree Weiss this evening at 18:30 British Standard Time, talking about SAP vendor management, governance, licensing and service management. We've got two presentations tomorrow, one at 10 a.m. in the morning, which is Hannah Price from Top Deck. I think I've gotten her name right. That's name right. I might not have. And she's presenting on the hero culture, a damaging mentality for collaboration and success. Then we've got at 1 o'clock tomorrow, Oliver Cronk presenting on the evolution of business as usual, and our wrap-up session tomorrow evening at 18:30, which is being hosted by our chair, Richard Josie. And he'll be hosting the most of our presenters we've had this week coming back to answer questions. And we will also put a takeaway slide up from each of our presentations to remind you of what they talked about, and pull all the themes together from the entire conference. So do join us for those. If you have registered and you only have worked out, now there's a dual process for registration. You get the the Eventbrite registration link for all the sessions, and you get individual session that you need to link through for the actual GoToMeeting information, GoToWebinar information. So make sure you've got those ready so you can join quickly tomorrow for all of those sessions. We do have a recording for each of our sessions, which will be published in about 3 weeks' time, and that's due to the fact that everybody's online and everybody needs the BCS to top and tail those videos and get them ready for production or publishing for us. So we'll have them hopefully for you in 3 weeks, so you can either re-watch the ones that you've missed, watch the ones you've missed, or re-watched any that were of interest to you. Today's session, a little bit about how we're going to go. There's going to be a break in the middle for your questions, and so do pop your questions into the question box on the panel at the side in relation to the GoToMeeting control panel, GoToWebinar control panel, sorry. And we'll also hold over some of those questions and have them at the end as well to generate a bit of a discussion there. But put comments, questions, whatever into that question box, and I'll bring them forward to Jonathan during those 2 breaks. So just to thank Jonathan for being with us this morning, and he's going to introduce himself and take us through this presentation this morning on full stack outsourcing. So welcome, Jonathan, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn, for that intro. That's great. Thanks to all of you for attending as well. I know there's a lot of choice and competition for your time. Maybe even some other service management conferences going on at the moment. So really appreciate you taking the time to spend it with us today. As much as anything that I'm going to say, obviously very interested in your views and your experiences in this space, which I know plenty of you have. Thanks also to the BCS SM-ITAM team for setting all of this up, doing all of this logistics, inviting me and recognizing the importance of this range of sort of interlinked topics around the digital journey and having the vision to assemble this conference. So thus far, the speakers have set a very high bar. I'm going to hopefully chin that bar today with you, but you can judge that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jonathan Lipton. I've got 36-ish years of experience across in IT, across projects, ops, operations, strategy, consulting, and particularly transition transformation. I've been lucky enough to work with and learn from some fantastic businesses, some great teams, inspirational leaders, and supportive colleagues, some of whom might even be dialed in today, who knows. We've all experienced some sort of character forming events together in the IT space, major global outages, natural disasters, corporate existential threats, vendor failures. We've been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirts. And of course, it's during some of these events that you test the integrity and strength of the partnerships that you've built internally with your own teams and externally with vendors who are helping you. So I'm going to talk about some lessons from the outsourcing journey today, tied to that digital agenda, tied to the role of SM-ITAM professionals on the call today. I've been part of some pretty big outsourcing deals during sort of 25 years at BP and led elements of those programs, ranging from sort of Adam in 2010 when we replaced 70 vendors with 5 across the globe, saved about $500 million over 5 years, and lots of other subsequent sourcing initiatives across my time at BP, all with significant transition and transformation, of course. Some of those I experienced firsthand with those of you on the call today, including actually Marilyn, who introduced us, by the way, who was a consultant with us at the time. I think one of the things I'd say about those is I've also operated the contracts that I've helped to specify, procure, and award. So when things went wrong, and surprisingly enough, or unsurprisingly, things did go wrong, there wasn't anybody else to blame. I was my own scapegoat, as it were. So I've lived the dream. I've put them together and operated some of these sourcing contracts with some of you. Couple of caveats, sort of health warnings. I totally love methodologies, frameworks, taxonomies. Those of you who know me know that. Today's going to be more experiential than sort of methodological to sort of provoke the conversation on digital to tie in with the conference. But we've got methods and frameworks available if we want to discuss them afterwards. My last role in BP was Global Service Delivery Director for Production, Manufacturing and Engineering. I left that to set up Silent Running, which is where I currently work, because we've got a passion for helping clients implement modern service delivery in the digital age. That's what we do now. Finally, ask whatever questions you want whenever you want to ask them. I mean, put them in the chat window. We've got a couple of breaks. I don't have a monopoly on the truth. You've got as much experience of much of this as I have, so feel free to share, critique and build. And we got some gaps, and our expert BCS facilitators will track the questions from the chat. Okay, so enough of that. Just a little bit about problem statements. What I'd like to think about, and I think it's worth thinking about, what your prime motivation for considering an outsourced solution might be. And you might have a whole range of these things. Reducing costs is obviously a prime driver. It always has been for many of the programs that I've been on. There have been existential threats in the industry, $40 oil, whatever. You've got to cut back. You've got to look at all of your costs and you've got to reduce them. So that's obviously going to be a big driver for considering outsourcing. You might want to improve your service delivery and accelerate service ownership. That's a big driver. Excuse me, these days, and improving your services and service could well be a big driver for wanting to source out some of the day-to-day operations, for example. You might want to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of your IT team to change your skill mix. Within the team that you've got, you might be looking to step change the team's capability sets by sourcing out some elements of the work to one of your partners or a partner. You probably these days will be wanting to accelerate digital transformation. Means a lot to different people, means, you know, it's very hard to pin down the definition of that digital journey for any particular customer, but the likelihood is you are trying to accelerate it in some shape or form. And I'll talk about a case study where we've actually done that. You are most certainly going to want to strengthen your digital security and generally attack your risk areas, understand your risk areas. You know, nobody needs reminding of the continual cyber threats that are out there. They literally are continual and continuous. And of course, risk reduction in the current climate is going to be key, and we'll all be re-rehearsing our DRBCP positions. You might want to improve your project delivery capabilities and throughput. So think beyond just service delivery, think into operations and beyond into your projects and programs. You might want to reshape or free up people to work on projects and programs. You could well be wanting to accelerate apps RAT and your migration to AAS. I mean, obviously a big part of what everybody's doing at the moment is within the cloud environments, the hybrid cloud environments, and migrating to as a service. And we had a great lecture yesterday about that. And sourcing can assist you in accelerating these things. And obviously, with your business drivers, you might be wanting to underpin a new business strategy or a new IT strategy, and you want to use sourcing to help you with that. Last but not least, and for those of you on the call, again, who are in the methodology and process space, then you might want to standardize your process and introduce industry best practices such as ITIL and others. Sourcing can be a shortcut, or can at least assist you in all of that. And you might want to do all of those things in setting up the sourcing program that you might be wanting to think of within your own corporate environment. So what are we going to discuss? Well, kind of three things. We're going to have a quick look at the sort of traditional approach to how we do that sourcing work. I'll take you through a full stack option as well, and a case study that we've been part of. I'll take a look at some of the game changers and the future. The only constant is change. There is an awful lot of change here in our industry at the moment, as we all know. We're all living it every day. And so let's take a look at how some of those factors impinge upon the sourcing discussion and debate. And then I'll show you some of the, and share some of the lessons learned, not in any particular methodological way, just as they have occurred to me, probably most painful at the top, ranging through to things we wouldn't want to do again, and things I might want to flag up to you if you're thinking of going down this route. In terms of sort of traditional approach, this is a graphic from Everest Group, and those of you in the sourcing space will probably have heard of Everest, very well known in the sourcing world for bringing together lots of the thought leadership. And you can see that this is the sort of number of deals that are out there in the last 12 months that split into the conventional towers or bundles of here consulting, I guess that's kind of code for perhaps project work, application maintenance, AM, application development, AD, service desk, network, desktop, data center. The conventional towers that we've sourced in the past, you can see that the number of deals out there is pretty significant, around up to 1,200 renewals out there. So the market is very buoyant, borne out by some of my colleagues who have been telling me how actively their clients are pursuing sourcing arrangements now, particularly post-COVID or during COVID. Maybe they had them started, or maybe COVID and their DR-BCP positions have pushed them this way. The total value of these deals this probably includes the consulting piece, circa 14 billion US. So this is a big market. There's a lot of activity out there in this sort of conventional space. And of course, we have all those tectonic shifts of cloud and as a service underneath it all. And our conventional approach, and I've been part of a lot of this work, would have been to look first at the AM space. So we would source the AM space. We would source the AD space maybe slightly differently. We would specify the service desk and maybe the desktop together. We would look for network providers. Typically, we'd now look at AWS and Azure for the big league players. We may look elsewhere. And we would probably want to migrate our data centers out of those environments into the cloud. And so traditionally, you would end up as the integrator here. You would keep yourself as the integrator here. You would make yourself you would join up all of the sourcing arrangements that you had. You would separately procure them, advised by your legal and procurement colleagues, and you would go to market in each of these blocks and bundles and look for the best possible cost value points, and then weave it together yourself in order to bring value to the corporation and to reduce your IT OPEX, increase your efficiency, and perhaps do some of those things about retraining or reskilling your workforce, or even changing the profile of the workforce that you had, the in-house groups. So that's sort of conventional view. Like I say, the takeaway from here is it's still a big, buoyant market, even in that sort of conventionally broken down format, where you end up as the integrator. So here's a slightly different view of the world from as a real case study. It's actually a case study of a global oil field services company, a complex global organization whose drivers were, well, you can actually see some of the drivers in the blocks here on this slide. I won't drain the slide, but you can see this is an actual slide taken from the client, where they were highlighting what they were expecting from each of the conventional stacks that we talked about earlier. So you can see that in the area of desktop and mobile, they wanted simplified management of devices and builds. They have global depots. In applications, they wanted a massively simplified applications landscape. They wanted to really hit the apps rat agenda. They wanted to variabilize costs in the infrastructure space and simplify their networks. And they also wanted to scale up and step up to a digital agenda by increasing their and improving their project capability as well. So I was lucky enough to be asked by their CDO, a visionary CDO, might even be on this call today, I don't know. I was lucky enough to be asked to help here to accelerate that transition through a sourcing initiative. And like all good C-suite executives, the CDO set the light on the hill here by saying, look, I want IT as a service. I don't want to be the integrator of all of these components. I don't want to go to market for all of these components and weave it all together. What I want to do is block this all out and have a vendor out there working for the company to allow the company to be freed up on the digital journey, to free up my skill base, to take care of the day-to-day, and to guarantee the integrity and security of the day-to-day from an IT standpoint. And I want to block that out and deal with that so that I can address these cost issues and variabilize my costs with IT as a service with a big block around that. So not the conventional approach to the market. I think that and the CDO believed that there were vendors out there, and we indeed set about searching for those, specifying this work. And we were, in fact, able to procure a vendor and partner to assist with that delivery of IT as a service for this particular client. And they're in the early days of, of operating that now. A couple of quick caveats. There was a great team at the company. This is not an indictment of the team that was there. It was really a recognition that we wanted to, and the customer wanted to free up this team to work in a more powerful way when it came to IT and the digital journey. They wanted a lot of this, the processes and techniques and tools that come with IT as a service and full stack like this. They wanted the freedom to allow the vendor to take the end-to-end accountability of operations all the way across the stack, from configuring devices in the field all the way through to head office systems. And they wanted to guarantee the integrity of their operations, and they wanted to reskill their own people. So we took this approach of full stack, and we also took an approach of accelerating the time to market. Now, traditionally, we've worked very closely with procurement and with legal, and you will still need procurement and legal to help you, but there are ways of shortening the cycles associated with specifying the work so that you can quickly go to market without having to specify down to the absolute minutiae of everything you want the vendor to do. So fascinating case study. We can talk more about it, but just to tell you and just to point out the difference between conventional and full stack. You might be thinking this only applies to sort of big mega deals. Not true, actually. This was a significant company, a global company, but thinking this way and thinking about IT as a service is an option at pretty much most scales of your operation, and you'll find vendors, both tier ones, the big scale vendors, and moving down the stack, who will be prepared to do this for you in a variety of different ways. Okay, so why consider the full stack? I'll just go over some of the pros and cons. The picture of the crane on the right, probably should have bled that in, but become obvious in a minute. Okay, so the vendor has the problem of working out the integration across the pillars rather than yourself. It provides a coherent end-to-end service journey for you and minimizes the handoffs, theoretically, between all of the parties. In other words, you can treat the whole block of IT as a service as a managed service, as opposed to just treating say applications management as a managed service or service desk as a managed service. So minimizes the handoffs and gives the vendor the issue of integration. It should improve your accountability and control, and it should theoretically give you faster cost reduction or faster access to the cost reduction. There are, I mean, obviously, I'm generalizing. You could argue that some of those benefits would also apply to conventionally bundling your estate, and that's indeed true. You just might find yourself intervening more in some of those areas. I would say some things to consider. Do you lift and shift, as it were, and then transform, hence the crane? Do you lift and shift into your new environment with your new vendor once you've selected them, and then begin the process of digital transformation or transformation generally? Or do you have a transitional phase in between? Or do you think about transforming and then shifting? So you've got some choices around the actual cadence and the way you go about moving the blocks of work, even if you've decided on one vendor to provide IT as a service. You will need a well-defined target operating model, or you will need your vendor partner to define that operating model for you. Now, I know that operating models are we could spend a lot of time talking about operating models, and each of you will have a view on what a good operating model looks like, and some of you on this call will have lived the dream of spending a lot of time defining an operating model, from a blank sheet of paper, from an IT department or a global IT group, and then finding it very difficult to implement because you haven't been specific enough about it. It will need to be supported by a sound technical strategy. That's why you have architects to do that kind of work for you. You will need to think about ways of working and operating models, or at least make that part of your procurement exercise to ensure that you get one that you can believe in. And of course, in-house options. There are, especially in the context of some of those game changers we'll talk about. I mean, I'll flag up site reliability and engineering as one that we'll be discussing, but that you obviously have in-house options, and you can mix and match the level of in-house teams that you want to retain. You might want them more to work on the major programs, or even some of the migrations that you're working on, towards cloud. You might want to retask your in-house teams, or you might feel that your in-house team needs a complete refresh. But you have got options around in-house and the balance of skills in order to achieve the end goal. Final few words before we break for some questions on what to look for in a sourcing partner. And again, you will have access to your vendor professionals, your vendor managers, and your legal teams to help you with all of this, of course. I would say the most important piece is great management and high quality teams that you can trust with vital processes. You're about to hand over the keys to the kingdom of your most important IT processes. You need to be able to trust the sourcing partner that you select, and they need to demonstrate to you that they run high performing teams that will be able to do that for your businesses. It's easy to say that, it's hard to do these things, and you can put lots of structure and methodology and rigor around your selection, and find it quite hard potentially to ensure yourself that the great management is really there, but you need to look for it. Cultural alignment. One of my leaders one of my managers at BP was very keen on badgeless teams. He always stressed badgeless teams is what it's about, and he's absolutely right, because at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's Christmas Eve, something's broken, it's a major outage, everybody's screaming at you. You may even have the TV companies on your back because it's clear that cars are queuing up outside a set of service stations across the globe because your point of sale systems have gone down. It's intense in those situations. You do not want to have finger pointing going on at those moments. You need a badgeless team. Your partner needs to be with you in that journey. And that generally means cultural alignment with your V's and B's. You don't have to have exactly the same values and behaviors as your partner, company or companies, but you do need alignment with all of that to avoid the stress points becoming breakdowns. And we've all been there, I think. Obviously, strength and depth across the stack from infrastructure to applications. If you selected that way, if you're going for IT as a service, then they need to provide. They are typically the tier one vendors are massive technical repositories. They have they're massive machines of technical experts, and they need to be able to provide you with that strength and depth across the stacks. Same sort of point. You may have selected the vendor because they're particularly expert in one core piece of your business, seismic, subsurface, pick one, retail, point of sale. They may be particular experts, but you want to draw out and be able to draw upon that technical leadership in that expertise. They need to be commercially strong and have good strategic vision. Yeah, we've all seen vendors fail, and we've seen vendors fail recently. And those of you who've been part of vendor failure, significant vendor failure, know how acutely painful that can be. So commercial strength is something to look for. Obviously, you will have your legal procurement teams investigating the integrity of the supplier base rigorously at all times, and they're very good at that. However, even a AAA rated company can fail, and those of you who remember the SATIAM crisis of a few years back, some of you on this call might remember it, will remember how panicked we were at the time when a major vendor who provides a lot of outsourced services potentially failed. So commercial strength and their vision is really important. You need the top-down alignment from the C-suite executives, the owners of the sourcing operation, right the way down to make sure that you have a solid partnership. And flexibility. Now, again, your lawyers and your procurement teams and yourselves, as you specify the work, will build in flexibility to the contracts that you assemble. But you really only find out how flexible a company, your partner is, when, again, you're exploring the limits of the contract that you've actually put together. Now, you would hope not to have to pull out the contract. Once you've defined all your contractual work, you kind of want to put it away and never have to look at it again. Of course, things aren't necessarily that straightforward. So you will need flexibility. You will need to set yourself up for success in that space. So I would say, looking for a sourcing partner, you need to balance their strengths with yours, work out what their USPs are, and exploit them as you develop the partnership. Big subject, lots of people got lots of views on it. Interested to hear yours. And I think at that point, it might be a good time to stop, Marilyn, and see if anybody's got any questions or observations or that they want to put into the room.
Yeah, I've got a couple here for you, Jonathan.
Are they difficult ones? If they're difficult ones, I'll move on immediately.
I'll filter them, shall I?
Okay, yeah, filter them. Easy ones first, Marilyn. You know the score. This is how procurement work with us. Yeah, go on.
Okay, so this was just a comment though. I think it's a bit tongue in cheek. Well, I hope it was. David says, not having someone to blame is careless. Politics is as equally important as technology.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
Question on that one is, would you agree that you can outsource execution, but you can't outsource responsibility and accountability? I think you mentioned accountability in one side, so I would have probably a different response to this one.
Well, I'd be interested to know how you see it, Marilyn. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the host company, you have to take accountability. If you're the host company, you've sourced to a partner, something has broken in full public knowledge, and it has had some significant consequences. You are going to have to front that up. You can't you are accountable for it. No accountability without responsibility is what I would say. You're accountable for it as the customer. Now, as we saw yesterday with the whole spreadsheet situation, fingers start getting pointed, and that's not a helpful place to be. I think you have to have the strength of your convictions to say, look, I own this relationship. I will look to my vendor to explain themselves, but I'm accountable for it. I don't think you can judge. I don't think you can duck the accountability.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
think
what
you're right.
you were, or did you have a different view?
Well, I was going to say some of the responsibility and accountability you can outsource, because that might be what you're wanting. You might want, to be able to have a risk or something that you are outsourcing, and you want somebody to be accountable for that. And then you buy that as a service, So that's where I would go. Yeah, okay. It's not straight down the line, 100% black and white
No,
for me.
no, but don't use source. My counsel will be, don't use your sourced partner as a scapegoat. I'm going to start scapegoat.com, by the way, everybody, and I'll step in and take the blame for anything that goes wrong as a service. But don't blame your sourcing partner. Look to yourself, because it's probably the way you set things up that were actually the root cause. Probably the way you set things up, not necessarily how the vendor your partner reacted, or how your teams reacted. It's probably the way you teed that up and the processes end to end that you should really be looking at.
Yeah, and I think, some of the things that we already talked about around this was that, oh, geez, I just lost my train of thought because I was reading more questions. I'll just give you another question. I'll come back
Yeah,
to what I was
give me
thinking.
another question. Yeah.
So the next question I've got is, the full stack option. Surely maintaining a good user experience across is all the options is vital, and keeping the end user customer service levels good while you traverse the outsourcing journey is also vital.
100% agree with that. It's all about the UX. I mean, if you're going to go for IT as a service, you're really you're looking for a vendor who can provide a seamless end-to-end journey, and that's a superb. You're looking for a superb level of UX, customer experience. Absolutely, you're looking for the business to. You want the whole of your IT delivery, and I know that in the case study that I used, the CDO wanted the integrity of the IT processes to be absolutely sound, and everything to be focused on allowing the businesses to do what they did best, which was oil field services, right? Not IT service provision, right? So it's absolutely about UX and seamless end-to-end service delivery where you've guaranteed the operational integrity of the environment.
Yeah, and I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say it's about the relationship. The whole point is, like, if you're buying a partner, you need to trust them. And actually, if you don't nurture and build that relationship, then how can you be a partner? How can you have a true partnership with them?
Yeah,
So back over to you. I'll
totally.
hold the rest of the questions.
Oh, you're going to hold the rest? Okay, fine. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Let's canter through the rest of it. Game changes. Everything is changing at the moment. It's obvious from where we all are to what's happening in the world. Let's think about a few of them. You may have your own thoughts. I've got a couple of screen snaps of my favorite books in the world at the moment. One is the Devops Handbook. I keep them with me on my desk all the time. And the second one is the Site Reliability Engineering and its companion book, the Workbook, SRE. But the impact of DevOps, you build it, you run it. I mean, those of you on the call who are part of startups or part of organizations moving to a more of a service ownership agenda, will be familiar with this. The whole move towards DevOps and the agile environments. You build it, you run it is a very powerful mantra, especially for those of us with career in operations, where we've received over the fence some questionable products from our colleagues in project work, shall we say, where the transition from project to operations has been particularly ropey. So in the DevOps world, of course, that doesn't happen that way. The people that built it will run it. Now, I've been lucky enough also to work with a startup over the last 18 months, and I found that, and it's a great startup, a really impressive organization with some fantastic technical thinkers and some great leadership. In practice, the developers are interested in Run. They're interested in Run, but they're actually more interested in developing product, and their product owners are driving them to produce more functionality more and more rapidly and get it out in the market in a continuous deployment, continuous integration kind of way. And those of you who've been involved in continuous deployment will understand all of that. You still need to think about Run, and your sourcing vendor needs to have a good handle on how they are going to live with the DevOps world, because it is very different in the CI/CD environments. I still think there's a market, or there's a place for operations groups. Obviously, SRE, which we'll talk about in a second, is the living embodiment of that from the Google model. And I would say that you build it, you run it is not necessarily the answer to all of your problems, but it is definitely a game changer you've got to keep an eye on. Service delivery automation. I'm sure there are plenty of people on this call who are ServiceNow, ServiceNext, Symphony experts, and who are highly knowledgeable in the areas of automation. I was talking to one of our ex-colleagues who is in the mining business, and who was saying that automation has brought them about 30%, at the level of 30% of all of their tickets being handled automatically, which I thought was a phenomenal achievement. They've done that through some advanced techniques. ServiceNow, I think, was their backbone, but 30% of your tickets handled automatically with only escalation to humans in extremis, I think, is phenomenal. But that's the way things are going. I mean, obviously, you've got machine learning, you've got AI, you've got products like Wipro's Homes, you've got IBM's Watson, you've got all of these powerful automation forces coming to bear alongside of monitoring to be able to take you to the next step of service delivery and the next step of automation. I think a lot of us out there would be happy with some basic automation and just bots that work, chatbots that actually take you somewhere useful other than point you at websites. We've all had that experience. But nevertheless, it's a game changer. Our lives are not going to be the same again. Service delivery is not going to be the same again. Asset management is not going to be the same again. And out there, you've probably got more experience of some of that than I have. Tooling underpins all of that. We talked about it. The ITSM tool sets that are out there, fantastic platforms now that enable you to codify your service journeys. Talk to that UX experience that we were discussing at the question break. They can make a phenomenal difference to the journey that the customer experiences and the way you handle incident, problem, change. All of the ITIL disciplines pre-built, pre-packaged. You don't have to spend a lot of time working out the theory there, because the tool sets are actually pre-configured for you to actually give you that technical methodological discipline. So fantastic tool sets that also jive in with your monitoring, alerting, and automation philosophies, so that you can again drive towards those targets of automation. So the tooling is important. Preemptive is now the language we should all be adopting, particularly in service management. I think you can use the concepts. I'll go forward to site reliability and engineering, treating operations as a software problem, to give you things like service level indicators, service level objectives, which build towards service level agreements. So SRE is a phenomenal discipline created by Google, Ben Traynor at Google, to apply software thinking to the operations problem and to build to operate, and to give SREs the gatekeeper rights to products going into production, so that you have very, very technically astute people dealing with the continuous integration, continuous development workflow. So those kind of things can lead you into this preemptive monitoring world. So you fix the problems before they become anything that the business or your clients and customers actually notice at all. There's nothing better with your business customer to have a conversation, not a retrospective one about service levels last month, but actually one where you can say, I avoided 5 or 3 P1 incidents today, or this week, or this month, or this quarter, because of our preemptive monitoring. We were ahead of the curve. We stepped in ahead of it. I'm not talking to you retrospectively. I'm telling you that we were ahead of the game. That's the best conversation you can have. The move towards service ownership is a game changer, and you don't have to look very far. You're probably part of organizations. In fact, we may even have some service owners on this call who can talk to this. Service ownership is the move towards end-to-end expertise, controlling the critical services that underpin the businesses that drive the things that drive value for your business. And service ownership is the way forward. There's no question about it. We've been developing these concepts for some time. In fact, I think most IT service delivery folk for a long time have felt like they were service owners. Now there's more discipline around that, again, supported by some of the tool sets like ServiceNow, for example, where you can model the services of your company. We had a great discussion on that yesterday from Mark in New Zealand, talking about how you model the services that provide value. So there's a fantastic theoretical body of knowledge around all of that. There's a fantastic technical support for it. And your sourcing partners need to lead you on this, and you need to tell them where you want to play in that space. Agility, speed to market, we've talked about continuous deployment, continuous integration. And I think, finally, as a service, obviously is the way forward. There are multiple, those of you who have worked in the SAP Salesforce space know that these are massively powerful platforms that your vendor partners need to be expert in. And it's really difficult to be expert in platforms of that scale and complexity, and yet they underpin a lot of businesses these days. And you've now got the introduction of citizen developers. So these tools are so powerful that the customers themselves are developing and implementing systems by configuring the platforms in order to develop systems that add value to their business directly. So you've got a phenomenal groundswell of expert users creating systems very rapidly, and that can cause its own problems. Again, these are all things that your vendor, your partner of choice, is going to have to help you with as you develop the operating model and technical roadmap that underpins your transformation. Goes without saying that cloud and those environments are key these days. And as we all become more dependent on AWS, Azure, and the cloud environments, then you're going to have to build those in to your operating models. So, look, I'm sure you've all got other game changers, and there are people better qualified than me to talk about the technologies that underpin some of these, because certainly the technology set is changing. Just quickly, what do we bring to the party? What does SM, Service Management, ITAM, Asset Management Professionals bring? I think a hell of a lot. Typically, and most importantly, deep end-to-end understanding of the existing estate. I would argue that nobody knows better the end-to-end journeys of your applications, infrastructure, environments than SM-ITAM professionals, right? You know how configuration items, what those CIs really are. You know how the systems integrate together. You know where the critical interfaces are. You know where the critical service levels are. You know what things feel like when they're broken, and you know, obviously, what value propositions within the business those systems support end to end. That's your expertise. Leverage that. You can help with that early problem statement that I talked about. What's the problem you're trying to fix here? Because you've seen most of those problems emerge, and you will be able to point your vendors towards them. Understanding the business outcomes and criticality. This is typically where you know what the value propositions, where the business generates its value, how you make money, how your businesses make money, and how the IT systems support that. In upstream oil companies, it's don't stop drilling, don't stop hydrocarbon production, don't interfere with the year-end accounts. You'll all have your own critical business events. You know what those are. You can provide that expertise as you provide a sourcing journey and as you underpin the digital journey. Risk. identification and management. Need I say more, given where we're at currently? But I often said to my team, our job is really about two things, actually. Risk identification and management. And I'll tell you the second thing in a minute, but risk is what you should be concentrating on. Your sourcing arrangements should free you to look at and manage risk. You should be concentrating on your DR. You should be concentrating on your business continuity, all aspects of that, even if it involves engaging the business in difficult conversations about what their continuity plans are. But that's your skill set. That's where you can add value. And don't expect your sourcing partner necessarily to know all of that or do that for you. They may take away some of the end-to-end drudge of your IT as a service, but risk management is up to you. Back to that point about accountability. You have to be able to bring stability during the transition. If you're going to go through a big transition with a vendor, you are going to be accountable for making sure, to a large extent, making sure that you maintain steady state operations through those difficult transitions, which will involve people transitioning from point A to point B as well. And this is the other point that I used to say to my team: you've got to learn. You've got to be willing to learn. You can't just define your contracts, expect them to get operated, sit back and enjoy. It doesn't work like that. It's continuous improvement, and you've got to have an appetite for continuous improvement. You've got to incentivize and reward continuous improvement as you move through the journey with your sourcing partner and with your own internal teams. And leadership and subject matter expertise, that's what you bring. You know where the skeletons are buried, and you have to lead with integrity through this process. Right. Finally, what have I learned? I used to have a lot more hair before I started this journey. So some of these lessons have been hard won and hard learned. Some of you on this call have been part of them with me, so you know what we've been through. Here's a few. Look, it's not particularly methodological. Got methodologies. We have methodologies. If you want to discuss them with me afterwards, I'm more than willing to do that. Happy to do that. Delighted to do that. But here we go. You can accelerate the procurement and legal cycles. Okay. Again, lucky enough to work with some companies who have been willing to do that. Don't get lost. Your procurement and legal teams are critical to your support. They need to be there. They provide, if you're specifying the work, then they need to provide you with the bubble wrapper around that. But you can accelerate those things. One of the ways you can accelerate them is by achieving the correct level of contractual or finding the sweet spot of contractual definition of specificity. Difficult word to say. One way we've used, one technique we've adopted to help with contractual definition is to actually involve the vendor, have the vendor participate in the creation of the scope documents. Sounds a bit counterintuitive. You'd like to say you could sit there, define all your specification from a blank sheet of paper, issue it to the market, have the vendors respond. If you get the vendors involved in, the partners involved in, prospective partners involved in specifying the work, then when the spec hits them, they're not as surprised by it. And we've done that collaboratively with multiple vendors in the room at the same time. Takes a little bit of work because people don't want to share necessarily, but if you can develop it collaboratively, you can hit the right level of contractual definition from early doors. You have to be prepared to make a switch to managed service and managing outcomes. We can talk a lot about SLAs and metrics, but you have to manage outcomes, and you have to be prepared to let as a service work as a service. If you continually find yourself intervening or feeling the necessity, even once you've awarded the contracts, to intervene and to interject and to step in and to tell the vendor and your partner how to solve it, you're not going to make progress. You have to step away and have the confidence and trust, and Marilyn mentioned it, the trust to let the vendor do the integrated work for you and to manage them on the basis of outcomes rather than the minutiae of all the steps within it. It's a big, difficult, easy thing to say, hard thing to define and to work to the managed service. I've learned that sort of SLAs always appear green. How many, and those of you on this call I know have been through those meetings where it's green on the outside but red on the inside, right? In other words, it's rolled up to a green SLA on a monthly conversation. Actually, the level of service, the UX has been totally appalling. Run across somebody from the business in the corridor when we used to have corridors, and they'll tell you it's been a terrible service. On the other hand, you're having a green, totally green conversation with your as a service vendor. It doesn't stack up. You need to get underneath it and understand that there's more to SLA management, as we've discussed, than just continually keeping things green. You've got to achieve that degree of end-to-end ownership, service ownership. Somehow, it's a big journey for a lot of companies at the moment. There's a discipline around that, and achieving it is not easy. It really is not easy because it involves providing a level of it involves a level of understanding, a level of subject matter expertise, and a level of trust and integration across the stack that is very hard to achieve. Don't expect sourcing to fix gaps in your strategic thinking. It won't. It's the old adage, isn't it? Don't outsource a problem. You can bracket some stuff up and ask the vendor to solve it. You might say, bring me up a level in terms of digital security, but don't absent yourselves from strategic thinking and thinking that your sourcing partner will do all of that for you. Again, back to those points about operating model and technical landscape. You will get early problems that could shake the relationship. They probably, in those early days, everybody's looking for the vendor to fail and will be at your neck if they do fail. You'll certainly hear about it quickly. You might not hear about the success as the silent running proceeds. The paradox of excellence, as it were, means that what floats to the first surface are the problems. You will get early problems. They can dent the confidence. They can make you think maybe this vendor wasn't the right choice for us. You have to move beyond that and have the strength to move beyond that. Glimpse of the blindingly obvious. Transforming the operating model of your team can be disruptive, especially if, let's face it, you're talking about people transferring from in-house to external or losing in-house folk in favor of the external vendor. You have to have the strength of your convictions to be able to push through that and to live with those processes, and they can be painful. We've discussed the ability to draw upon legal and procurement expertise. When it works well, it's superb. It's the best, triumvirate of your IT technical teams supported by legal and procurement to build the right type of contract in the right kind of way with your new partner. The team have to believe that the journey is, this goes for most business objectives, doesn't it? But if you have the team underneath you, then they'll help you with the difficult moments of transition. Let's face it, you are going to be handing over, you're going to be asking people who understand systems to explain those systems to somebody else who is going to take them and run them. So it takes a lot for a team to be able to do that. It's not an easy thing to do, to say, here's everything I do, I've written it all down, I'm going to give it to you now. What happens to me, right? But what happens to you can be more liberating and more exciting, I think, and I would argue. But you've got to be prepared to make that transfer. And it's a mind shift, a mind state change. And you've got to be resilient through this. It's not the easiest journey in the world, particularly full stack is tough. You have to have realistic expectations. You've got your contracts and you've got your SLIs, you've got your operating model, but you need to be resilient through this and be in it for the long term. These deals are often 5-year deals with maybe a 3-year break clause, but you need to be resilient as you experience some of the turbulence around these transitional journeys. All of the tier 1 vendors, many vendors will say we can take on all of your systems in 90 days, but you have to be resilient through that process, and you have to lead through it. Leadership is key. So I'll stop there. We're on the hour. Whether we have any extra questions or not, I don't know. Marilyn, anything else? Oh, I'll leave you with my my contact details. Very happy to take any feedback on this if we don't have time here, and take the discussion further as you want to. A few of my contact details there, and obviously hope you'll participate in the rest of the conference with some of the other great speakers.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. We do have a few questions, and I know we've a few people have jumped off. They've obviously had other
Yeah, sure.
commitments to join. But I just want to put one or two of them together here because it's around SLAs. And David asks, firstly, IT as a service, who manages or validates the SLA? And then rolling that into his other question, which is, or his other statement, is always green SLAs. Are they an indicator of simply choosing the wrong metrics? And what's easy to measure, and maybe what should you measure?
Wow, yeah. Who validates IT as a service? I mean, that's up to you to put in the parameters. I mean, look, it's a big conversation. I've got a sort of list of things that typical CIOs will always ask around the integrity and the quality of their service. So I think, you know, you can have a very detailed conversation and codify the mathematics around measurement, but you should really concentrate on delivering business value and not interrupting critical business events, I would say, as a high level piece around as a service. I think what's really super interesting is some of these modern tool sets like ServiceNow, maybe some of the more advanced AI diagnostics that the vendors can provide, can give you fantastic operating dashboards that are almost, especially with monitoring and alerting, minute by minute dashboards. If you've set your indicators and objectives up correctly, you can have on your desk now not the sort of conventional look back monthly reactive, but you can be looking real time at the state of your services using online dashboards provided by some of the new tool sets. So the whole game has changed on validation of that. But I think ultimately what matters is how you're supporting the business processes and the value that your business is generating. So if you're in oil field services, you know, have you managed to correctly put out all the containers that your customer needs onto the rigs? You know, you think about the business markers and the IT supporting those business processes, and they're your measures of success. Does it mean if everything is green, have you got it wrong? Not necessarily, but you might need to get under the surface of it, work out where the root cause of the angst that a business might be experiencing really is. I mean, you know, the business might be feeling terrible about the service generally because of, I don't know, conferencing is not working. Video conferencing was a favorite one. Skype for Business used to be a classic, didn't it? Until they improved it. But it was often the thing that you had the conversation with the CIO or even the business about was Skype for Business, even though the rest of your SLAs were all green, you know, from a complex apps management perspective.
I think one of the really good things that I discovered there at BP was managing outcomes. And we had Roddy Barnes come in here at the conference a couple of years ago talking about the shift to outcomes.
Roddy, yeah.
And, you know, like, honestly, that's like, you still have an SLA around that, but actually the shift that we're looking at, especially now when we talk about like availability, for example, if a department only needed to have a report printed Thursday once a month at 12 o'clock to issue to the market or something, that's kind of the IT SLA that you need to be able to meet, because as long as you can deliver that outcome, that's where we should be moving to. So yeah,
yes, a much better answer than mine. And you had to mention Roddy, didn't you? Because actually, I think Roddy's at the moment. I think Roddy's on a service. I think he's a guest speaker at a ServiceNow conference right now. I messaged him just a minute ago. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Roddy's on the money. As always, that's the service ownership pitch. Outcomes is what it's all about. And that means you understand, I mean, it's easy to say it, but it means you understand your business processes, of course. Back to, that's where the expertise is, not necessarily some of the minutiae underneath it, but you understand where the value is.
Yeah, but that could be like how you get your measure or your metric more appropriate, rather
Yeah,
than
yeah.
that you might see it red for the whole month that IT wasn't available, but actually what was critical was delivered.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I would say in the matter of things like at a more granular level, monitoring and alerting, the concepts of service level indicators and service level objectives become more relevant. So they're things you get from SRE kind of workbooks. They're very important, and the SRE view of it is that your SLA is actually built from, is the sort of legal representation of a lot of your service level objectives and indicators and objectives. And so the way you set those alerting thresholds can drive a lot of that conversation as well.
Yeah. Another one here from David, just probably one more before we wrap up today.
Yeah.
DevOps is great, but DevOps can become a silo itself. The stakeholders must be involved, not just the dev and the ops. So like sort of feedback loops can be bigger than the software delivery. And really, it's like, should that be the case? And if so, be it from design thinking right through to the end user experience.
Yes, I mean, for me, the DevOps, the challenge of DevOps, amongst other things, is this emphasis on continuous deployment and continuous integration. And I think to the point about silos, I mean, product owners can be very forceful about the silo that they're operating in. I'm not quite sure if that's what David meant by his question, but a product owner can want to push their product at all costs because they need to get product to market very quickly to satisfy a user requirement, and that puts strain on the system all the way down it. I think in the world of sourcing, you just got to be able to, and listen, for all of us, we've got to be able to live in this new world of more rapid speed to market. Gone are the days of the quarterly releases, and here are the days of 10 releases a week. And so whether that's multiple silos that you're dealing with feeding through into productive environments where you don't want to interrupt or cause risk, you've got to be, unfortunately, that's the new world, and we've got to step up to that, and your vendors have to step up to that and guarantee the integrity even in those complex environments.
Yeah, cool. So I actually had one comment as well. I know in the very first slide you talked about cost reduction as being one of the drivers. And interestingly, when we had Duncan's presentation on Monday, we talked about how work employees are very much overworked, and there's just volumes and volumes of work. And I think, working with sourcing, sometimes when you want them to do something for you, they've got so many projects on and you might not be able to get what you need from people. Like, when do we get to a point where organizations actually stop trading off these cost reductions as like the be all and end all, and actually go, we need to employ more people to actually get work done? Because that work-life balance doesn't always get kind of delivered, really.
No, you make a really important point, and it, when you define something as a managed service and you say, well, I don't care whether you've got 1,000 people or 2 people under that managed service, because I'm outcome based, right? I'm managing you by your outcome. It's a bit of an inhuman approach to it. And in practice, you do care. And even though you've got as a service, you've defined something as a service, you actually still probably want to know what it looks like in reality from a people perspective. So you can do things like randomly turning up at the vendor's office on a Sunday afternoon to see who's on call and who's doing work. But certainly during incidents, I think that where you see it at its most extreme when you've got multiple projects and you've got shortage of resources, as you've sort of described there, Marilyn, and you need to be wary of that. You need to be wary of the mythical man month or mythical person month kind of approach. You can't do a month's worth of work with 30 people in one day. It doesn't work like that. Even if you do throw resources at it, you have to allow people the space to operate. And you also have to be mindful during intense incidence of the workload on people. So, you need to put an emphasis on safety, and to make sure that even the managed service machinery that's dealing with your critical incident and critical outage has some time to rest and recover and recuperate, because people make very bad decisions when they're tired and exhausted. So I think you'll find good vendor management, good service management, good service owners will naturally do that. But you can't be so mechanistic about this, even if you think you've got all the dashboards in the world and you've got the contractual mechanisms tied down, that you ignore the people side of it. Finally, I'd say that incentivization / penalty regimes are often not very helpful in this space. So, I mean, my experience of financial penalties associated with missing SLAs or targets has not been a particularly productive one. That tends to make the thing only worse. But you may end up dealing with litigious or highly litigious operators who, do want to go down that route. I don't think it's a particularly productive one. It puts a lot of strain on the teams and on the relationship side of it, as you know, Marilyn, and it's best avoided.
Yeah, it's certainly not what I like in a vendor. I mean, I do it, it's my job, but certainly vendor management, my job is normally to build the partnership and build a relationship, and through the tough times as well as the easy times, so
Absolutely.
important. Wonderful to have you on here today, Jonathan. Thank you so much for
Pleasure.
joining us and bringing this to light for everyone. And looking forward to welcoming you back on Wednesday at our panel discussion, where we'll pull all these threads together. Maybe I'll save up some of my questions, like that one I just gave you, to that panel as well, to balance.
Excellent. Look forward to it, and thanks to everybody for listening, and thanks to you for facilitating, Marilyn.
Lovely. Okay, do join us at 6:30 this evening if any of you are interested in going through the SAP journey with Desiree, and then look at tomorrow's session or come back for our panel discussion tomorrow evening. So thank you.
Thanks. Whew. Hello, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm just helping the attendees leave. Try not to get rid of Jason, who's on there still. Why is Jason on as an attendee?
Well, because of
probably
experience of this go-to-meeting thing we're on.
All right.
Yeah, I'd signed it. I'm
probably
on. Did we? Oh my God.
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay.
So yeah, 24 gone,
Okay.
6 still here. That's total of 30, which is great. So we're starting to get all those people you invited. Julian Haywood was on. There was a couple of other people I recognize the names of. I think Dave.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
David was. You probably saw. David Jones. DJ. He's actually the CD. He's the CDO I gave credit for, because DJ is the CDO at Swire Group, which is who I was working for. He's happy with the messages, by the way. I made sure he was happy with it. Yeah, very good. I mean, well, hopefully people got something out of that. I don't know. We shall see, I suppose.
I thought it was a good presentation, yeah. But I'm working for the more vicious end of outsourcing. Well, that's not quite true. But there is a more vicious end of outsourcing around still.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've seen a bit of that in the governmental sphere. Yeah, I think that's where, I mean, we were often good cop, bad cop, right, Marilyn? I mean, it was quite often,
it works. Yep.
It has to be that way in a sense. In fact, in BP, David, we were as IT, we were explicitly precluded from negotiating. We didn't do any negotiating. Marilyn and the procurement team did the negotiating with legal. We didn't. We set up our requirements, and then it was over to the bad cops to do the rubber hose treatment on the vendors. Yeah.
Have to get a bit with analysts, because somebody is trying to sell my work for large sums of money. I try to talk with people purely on whether their stuff works or not. I try not to get involved in any of the commercial side of things, because you can't have that conversation if people think that you're serving two masters. You know, the conversation I have with people is purely about, does this make sense? Can you answer my questions?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you don't want it to sound. It's part. I mean, look, the reality is that at the operational level, you quite often end up, you do sort of negotiate. I mean, because over a piece of work, as you know, Marilyn, I mean, over any individual piece of work, you might end up doing a bit of negotiation, but the framework, you do it within a framework, right? You've got the master services and then the call-offs and all the rest of that stuff, and you want to operate within the framework, but you kind of don't want to have. I mean, I'm hopeless at those commercial conversations. I empathize too much with the vendors, you know.
But that's fine. I mean,
sorry.
That's usually sourcing. That's the bad cop, and vendor manager. That's because vendor manager is running the relationship with service management. So, you know, we normally are a partnership with them, and we normally go, we want these people to do this business. So how can we make sure the scope will get us what we want through sourcing? I mean, I've done that in many organizations, like writing the right scope to get what you want, especially in a government organization.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You've got. Sorry, David, Karen.
Well, without a service, the adversarial approach doesn't work. If you have a partnership, if you're both trying to build an outcome, that can work. If you're trying to screw them down to the lowest possible price, and if it's an adversarial relationship, you've got a lot of other clever people trying very hard to put one over on you, and it's not a very good way of running a business. You know?
No, I mean, we used to put very clever people like Mara. I mean, we had very clever people up against equally clever. I mean, IBM being the classic, of course. Mara. It'd be interesting. Actually, I'm looking forward to the SAP conversation this evening because you know, I mean, Oracle, SAP. They're, as been discussed with other speakers, they're the masters of this. Microsoft, you know, they're the masters of this conversation, and you know, I don't know how you guys do it. It would drive me nuts.
Microsoft are the canniest, cleverest vendor, particularly IBM and SAP. I've never worked with it. Actually, I've never worked with IBM or SAP. I've worked with Oracle. Oracle are just like a bludgeon, whereas Microsoft's very clever, very subtle. You know,
they're smart.
with them, but
they're
my goodness.
Smart operators. Yeah, they make you feel good about it. No, absolutely, Kylie. I mean, I was once described, or myself, and actually, you remember Nigel Howarth, Marilyn? Yes, do you remember Nigel Howarth at all? Did you come across Nigel? Procurement guy. No. Anyway, he and I were described by none other than Larry Ellison as the dust on the table, the grit in the oyster between BP and. Oh yeah, we were arguing the toss over. So, and Larry, somehow, I do not know how Larry got involved, but whenever you're at the Larry level of insanity, so yeah, you know, I mean, all we were doing was talking about we wanted some positive requirements met, you know. But yeah, Oracle are a machine, IBM are a machine, SAP are a machine. But then the Accentures, believe me, the Accentures and the Wipros, the TCS, the Infosys, you know, those guys, are also very, very smart negotiators. They've been there before. They've done it before. They know what you want. We want, you know, we would go there and say, right, we want 50% off our OPEX. I mean, we would do that, 50% off our OPEX, and we want it tomorrow. And look, we're kind of big enough to muscle in and be able to do that. But in the end of the day, you can't hold all the cards and expect to win the, you know, it's a bit, there's a game there. I'm not very good at that at all.
You get what you measure, you get what you negotiate. So if you want 50% off your OPEX, you may get that. It may kill the user experience, but you didn't ask about user experience, you asked about OPEX.
And absolutely. And look, I mean, when you're dealing with existential threats like like your core oil, when it comes to oil, as that slipped down the charts from 100 to 40 and below to 20, you've got no choice. You have to cut the user experience. You might have a rough user experience as a business. Sorry about that. We've got to save $80 million worth of OPEX next year. So suck it up, you know.
If as long as you do that with your eyes open, it's fine. It's when you pretend that you can adjust all the factors positively at the same time, Yes, we want it cheaper and better and faster, all at the same time, and with fewer people. And
although CIOs are apt to ask for all of those things. That's how they'll position it. They'll say, I want all of this, right? And you guys go and make it happen. But I just want to go there and shake Larry's hand and say, right, job done, or shake the boss of Wipro's hands and say, right, I'm done.
So you're
I think my experience at BP was really good because at BP they would say when we did have to slash all those, down because the oil price dropped, what levers can we pull? Like what changes can we make to our contracts, like without impacting the user experience, or what is, where can we get cost savings? And there were like upgrades, downgrades built into the contracts anyway. So there was stuff that we could do before we actually went, let's just slash the bottom line.
Yeah, and let's face it, we all know that there's inefficiency built into all of these processes. And if you that's where the whole lean thing comes in. I mean, very good friend of mine, well, he's now at Apple, but he spent a lot of time in automotive manufacturer, and at Honda, the lean guys would come across and say, right, do this process in half the amount of time. And everybody would say, totally impossible, can't do it. They'd come back in 6 months, lo and behold, the team had done it. And then what they'd say is, okay, well done. Now do it in half the amount of time again. There's always inefficiency. There's always slack. There's always places you can look. I think the trick comes in there does come a point, and I think we were pretty close to it in some of the stuff at BP. We'd gone to the bone. There wasn't any further. There's a limit to how small that managed service team can be and still deliver the service. And you can't go to the Wipros and the Accentures and the Infosys and what have you and say, look, take 50% out of it, because they'd turn around, as you know, Marilyn, and say, well, we took 50% out. We've done that 3 iterations of outsourcing now. There is nowhere else to go. So they will look to the projects to make money, right? There are other areas they can make money from. And that's the other point, David, is there may be lost leaders. So they may say, well, we will throw away. We'll operate it for nothing if you give us all the project work.
Yeah, Microsoft does that. Remember that everything's free until you come to depend on it, then suddenly it gets more expensive.
Not for nothing is Mr. Gates the second richest guy in the world or whatever.
That's Coca-Cola's model, wasn't it? They used to give away free Coca-Cola in the very beginning till it got people to like their product.
That was certainly Red Bull's model. I mean, Red Bull basically, Mateschitz just basically gave it away in volumetric. He threw away, he would hand it out until you became completely dependent on it. And then you're stuck.
Isn't caffeine actually addictive? So with Coca-Cola, even though they took the cocaine out of it, you actually get addicted to Coca-Cola as a caffeine.
Yeah. Exactly.
So Microsoft is just as bad. Once you got that software on your desktop and all your users using it, it's hard to replace it. Well, it's not hard to replace it. We say that, but actually, you just got to.
Yeah, you've got to.
Well, it comes back to that UX, doesn't it? If you're used to using a Microsoft product, your productivity just drops the moment you're asked to change. That's the problem.
So a couple of quick questions. Did we? Do you think we hit some of the digital sort of markers that you can take forward to the wrap up? I mean, do you think there were some themes, or do you think we missed? Was there something we should have concentrated on there that people would have been more interested in deep diving on, like the metrics or the monitoring or the tool sets or the? I don't know.
No, because I think the critical thing that this pandemic has showed us is that digitalization needs to be about business outcomes, and it needs to be about, I mean, it's a story that's been going for years now, hasn't it? And, it still needs to, you still need to be hitting that tub in order to drum it into people's thick brains that it's about the business, it's not about the technology, and I think you hit that. So
I mean, I've just
Marilyn, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can, Jason. You're quite quiet though.
Sorry, I've had fun and games trying to get a PC up and running. Just to answer your question, Jonathan, I work for Magnox. We're still on Windows 7, and we recently outsourced to Soprasteria from Atos. And I think the big thing that something you hit on was like the partnership, where you're all IT regardless of which company you work for. And the big thing that we've had a problem is that we've got Sopra have a outsourced desktop hands-on support. So to get to a point where we could buy second-hand laptops to roll them out to the business to get people up and running when they were not allowed on sites, that became very much it had to be run as a project. We had to pay this. We had to follow those rules. It was very much this is what we're doing and you can't get around it. This is in the contract. And there was no partnership working together. And I think that we could have been a lot more agile if Sopra were not that, well, this is what the contract states, we don't care how much you're suffering, we're going to stick to that. And we've never got that partnership with them yet.
No, and look, I mean, how many times has that been repeated in various organizations? You only really, and you probably never tested that when you were offering it out to the market, I mean, it's hard to test it until it actually happens, and then you find out how flexible they are or they aren't. Now,
how do you make that partnership? How do you make it, if you're going out to buy, how do you get it in there?
Does Marilyn want to say something?
No, you need vendor managers.
Oh, you need vendor managers. Oh, sorry, yes. What you need, Jason, is vendor managers.
Right.
Actually, I'll tell you what you can, alongside vendor managers, what I would argue is, if you develop the specification of work a bit more collaboratively, right? And if you actually rehearse, back to this, the more I practice, the luckier I get. If you actually, during your procurement cycle, put in some edge conditions, like what would you do if, right? How would this actually work? And try and think of those extremes of the contract and then dry run them with the guys before you've signed up and see how they react. You can start to get a feel for whether you've got the right cultural fit, right? Now, to David's point, if it's purely money, right, if this is just one of those ruthless exercises, that then your procurement and legal team, and I don't know, maybe even your leadership might be going, yeah, lovely, not interested, I want OPEX, right? But you can actually, and even when you're in the relationship, when you're not in and I appreciate that's not now because you're in these stressful times, but you can dry run some of these things, do it as bench exercises, throw a scenario out. Like, how does the military do it? They continually rehearse, right? They continually rehearse so that although no plan survives contact with the enemy, and undoubtedly whatever your processes are, they won't be fit for the incident that you face. If you've at least rehearsed in the safety of your own, in the comfort, in a safe environment, some of the extreme conditions, and seen how people behave, you can take a little bit of a move towards that badgeless environment. Easy to say, harder to do because you have to keep working at it.
Isn't this, though, saying that you should test the whole system, not just test the product, the technology, but the whole system, including a relationship? And some of those role-playing games around the edge conditions of when the relationship goes wrong are actually part of testing systems delivery.
No, very good point. Yeah. I think the trouble is sometimes you don't have the luxury to do that because you're so involved in the day-to-day. Or the real test is when you're actually in the middle of it, like you were with pandemic, doubtlessly.
But I think also an outcomes-based focus actually alleviates some of that temptation to really drive towards what's the letter of the contract. There's a really good book called Getting to Yes Without Giving In, which is an amazing primer for how to negotiate outcome-based results. And I think the key thing it says is, look, when you start focusing on outcomes, you open up the possibility of creative solutions that you would never have thought of as yourself, but because you're focused on the outcomes, between the two of you, you can come up with this amazing solution that suits both of you. So that's at a very high level. I mean, once you hit the crunch time and things have devolved down to a war of words about what's in the contract, then those sorts of issues it's too late. But you know, there are techniques that you can use to sort of avoid getting to that
I mean,
point in the first place. The other one
yeah,
actually, which
no,
sorry, go on.
no, sorry,
The other
Karen. No,
technique
what
I've
was the
used
other
with
one?
anger is yeah, so it's negotiation principles. So you sit with the people you're negotiating with, and you say, right, what I want out of these negotiate outcome based again is, and you'll have a list of 10 outcomes that you want, and basically you'll find that your negotiating partner agrees immediately with at least 5 of them, because those outcomes, you both want those outcomes. So you just cross them off. Okay, so we don't need to worry about those. That's sorted. So, okay, what's your 10 negotiating principles? And you'll find that, okay, their 5 with same as your 5 crossed off. Then there's another 5 from them that you need to sort of, again, find these creative solutions. Do you see what? Sorry, I don't think I've explained that very well. But you both have a set of simple negotiating principles that you then focus on reaching agreement, and you'll find that you can reach agreement in a really creative way sometimes.
Jason, would any of those approaches help the situation that you've got, or are you too far down the confront route?
We've got another 4.5 years left on the contract, so I guess what we'd have to do is worry about it next time. The problem is we're funded by the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, taxpayer. So what happens is we go out and say who wants to tender for our business. We shortlist it down to 3, and then the contracts are put in a room under lock and key, and one person will go in and is only allowed to look at the contract based on what they do, commercial or security, and they have to mark it out of 10 or whatever, and then all the scores from all the people are added together, and the person with the highest score wins. If vendors ask us questions, we have to collate all the questions, provide answers for everyone, and send it back to all 3 companies.
Level playing field.
We never allowed to get in a room and sit down and discuss the contract with them. So we can't look at a contract to get them in a room and say, well, we asked about this and we don't fully understand what you mean. Can you expand on that? We're not allowed that opportunity. So I guess what we would need to do is maybe have scenarios written into the contract to say, as part of the tender process, if you had scenario A, how would you respond?
How would you respond?
Yeah,
the
and
problem
then
comes. Go on, Karen.
No, I was going to say that maybe that it has to be right at the beginning, where when they're in the contract and say you need to answer these scenarios, to then give us a feel on it. But how do you score that when actually we've got to show value for the money for the taxpayer?
It does take more of an effort in the scoring and marking, because the scenarios are a bit softer. It's not like, what is your service level on some kind of hardware piece, and obviously you've got the complexities of confidentiality and secrecy and all the rest of it. But I think if you put a bit of effort into that, and you show some rigor in the marking scheme, because people's responses will be different, it will sort of pay off. I mean, even if a vendor says, well, they give you a crappy answer. I mean, because quite often this is might be verbal rather than, technical responses. And you have to sort of sift out what they really mean from a bunch of words or some graphics and a PowerPoint, But get them up there and get them to explain it. Say, right, here's a scenario. You've got 10 minutes to explain. In fact, here's a scenario in an sealed envelope. I want you to read it for 10 minutes. We've done this before. I want you to read it for half an hour. I'll give you half an hour. I'll give your team half an hour, right? Read it, come back and tell me and us and we'll mark you on a set of criteria. We've got a set of criteria. We know what the right answer is, quote unquote. We want to see if you reach the same answer that we reached. That can be quite insightful in terms of who in their team actually steps up to coming up with the right solutions.
So what about resetting a relationship? Because it sounds like that relationship, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, needs a bit of a reset. So Marilyn, vendor manager.
Yes, send in Marilyn is the other answer.
I don't know. It's a tough one with they're not
because
delivering.
You're
they're not delivering in certain areas, and it's like everything starts to become a project because it's not in the BAU service space. It's just.
We've all been there. I mean, we've all been there. It becomes, okay, that's not how we originally specified it. So ergo, it's project work, and you're going to charge, 6 times your normal rate. I mean, the only thing I'd say to the vendor, and I'm sure you'd agree, Marilyn, ultimately that just means you're actually going to do yourself out of work by approaching it that way in the long term, I think. Because if everything is would you agree, Marilyn?
I was going to say, I've actually used some coaching techniques on vendors in a room, basically, to get the outcome that I needed, as in get them to see what the vision is. Get them to like kind of understand what your end game is, because if they don't know what your vision is, then how can they help you get there?
Yeah, I mean, we're moving to office. Go on, sorry.
No, I've just found that useful in going, okay, now they understand where I'm coming from because I've been able to set that scene up properly. And then I say to them, how can you get me there?
Yeah, I mean, we're moving to Office 365 in the next 6 months. And I know in the background there's a make buy decision on the support model for Office 365. And it's, do we have the current supplier, which we're not particularly happy with? Do we bring in a new supplier just to do Office 365, or do we insource and have some staff to do it? So they've already got to a point where they're not delivering, and we only went live in February after 18 months of transfer from the old supplier. And we've got to a point where we're even looking at new companies coming in and doing new parts of the business. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that then you're increasing your governance overheads as well to start managing multiple suppliers.
Well, that's my job, so I'm fine with that because it keeps me more. There's less chance of being made redundant.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have vendor managers in there?
We have a commercial team that sit across the power stations.
So they're not really dedicated. You guys who own the service are the ones who do facing off day to day with the vendor more than the commercial team.
Well, commercial have done the contract, and then we pick it up afterwards and do the monthly meetings and stuff. If there's anything gets down to contractual where they're not delivering and we want recompense or something, that's when commercial gets stuck in as well. It's very much a commercial than service.
Yeah, and therein lies part of the problem. I think you've got to operate as a complete team with commercial, legal, procurement. If you start, and they may argue, yes, but we have to have firewalls in between all these things because of corruption or blah, blah, blah. I can see them arguing that. Having said that, if you don't sit down as a group and work out collectively what your objectives are and what good looks like, then you end up with this split down into silos again, and everybody passing stuff over the boundary of two silos, a bit like projects to operate, right? It's like, yeah, we've given you our absolute best, you may have the best contract, but it's inoperable. And it's only inoperable. Nothing is impossible to the people that don't have to do it, right? And if contracts just throw over the fence and say, you guys operate, you can operate, this is genius work. And you go, yeah, well, you try living this dream at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's broken, because it ain't. It's unfortunately, it's if you haven't set yourself up for success at the start. I would have thought though, if you've still got 4 years to run, it's worth throwing your toys out the pram now, right? Because otherwise you're in for 4 years of, you might enjoy that kind of work, Jason, I don't know, but you're in for 4 years of head banging frustration and worse, the whole nonsense around financial penalties, and even worse, the threat of, well, we'll just throw you out if this doesn't work. Well, the other one, well, we'll just retender it then immediately. Oh God, that's double the amount of work.
But equally, you can bet your boots they're unhappy with you guys as well. So the reset is not we need to, we need X, Y, and Z from you. The reset is, we're not happy. We're pretty sure you're not happy. Let's sit down and understand what our outcomes are, where we're going wrong, and how we both can partner to make both of us happy while we're achieving these outcomes.
Yeah,
that's what I
think we've tried that a little bit.
Yeah, all remote, of course. Yeah.
I think we've tried it, but the service director seems to be stretched on other accounts as well, and I don't think he's too up for that at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, well, and there you go. Another common problem. You probably had a great team pitch it during this is the other one. You have a great team pitch it, and then you find out that the guys, the sales team is not the guys doing the operate, right? And they've thrown it across to a group of hard pressed guys who are also guys and girls who and team who are also up against it for other customers, and you end up in the worst of all possible worlds.
Yeah, I think we've got the TA's the only guy that was on the bid that's still there, a technical architect. Everybody
I'm
else.
surprised he's still there. Normally they all run for the hill. I mean,
Exactly.
we even went to the extent of codifying it, saying you cannot, if the people appear to sell to us, they must be people who we will see long term. We said it, but they didn't do it.
Yeah, see, we did that as well. I remember it was not an outsourcing deal, it was a reseller deal. You know, we were absolutely, these, you know, the people we're seeing in this room today are the people who are going to be managing this long term, aren't they? Oh, yes, they are. No,
Oh, yes.
of course they weren't.
It seems to me when things go wrong, you look at who's actually benefiting. Quite often when things look like they're rubbish, they're actually being very good for one particular person or group who's doing quite nicely out of whatever's happening. And they're the reason that the things aren't being reset, aren't being done properly.
Yeah. Hey, I've got to drop. I've got just a couple of other things to do. Have we got enough? Do we need to feed any themes through to Richard for the wrap up, or have we got enough to go on for Wednesday?
Yeah, no,
Tomorrow, isn't it?
he'll just use your takeaway slide. And he'll just because you'll be on the panel, he will maybe say a few words, and then he might go, okay, is there anything that you want to add as a summary? Have I missed anything that you covered that's an important point kind of that you want to get across to the audience for those that missed it, for example, that sort of thing?
Yeah, okay.
Having said that, given that you're so diligently sitting through them all, Jonathan, if you do sort of see some themes over the 3 days, I'm sure Richard would really appreciate a note.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. For example, with Mark's yesterday, which was great. The whole point about, well, he was talking about sort of service ownership models and value models. I mean, there's a lot in that he was talking about frameworks that you could take forward. So I think there are some sort of great themes emerging that Richard will be able to draw out. I'll drop him that.
Yeah, and we do have some feeder questions, which I think I put on the email to everyone that we're going to use, but we're hoping to get the audience to ask us more questions as well and not necessarily have to rely on those questions, seed questions that we created.
Yeah.
Mind you, we don't have the most questioning audience, do we? I think pretty much all the questions we've asked, apart from maybe one, have come from the community, but that's okay.
I mean, it's always difficult with these things, because do you interpret silence as everything's that it's clearly the work of genius, your work is clearly brilliant, or do they just can't be bothered, or they're doing five other things? Yeah. It's very hard. I mean, I think the best you can hope for is sort of the way you moderated it, which is to lob in a few and see if it provokes somebody else. Actually, Julian was saying to me, he did have a couple of questions. He had some problems with technology, typical service owner. And so I think sorry, cheap shot. I think it's very, it's even when the worst sort of in environments are the sort of big town halls where you've got the big boss standing up there and he or she says, right, any questions? And of course, everybody's fearful of putting their hand up.
Yes.
Well, we might do better in the panel, because we're going to have all the videos of people on, so you're going to see more faces when you're in the audience than screens, I think.
That might help.
But the other thing I think is the fact that we have David asking such amazing questions, and then
David,
Marilyn and I.
Congratulations, you're a professional questioner.
He is. The vast majority. I mean, the vast majority of viewers are going to be watching the recording, and it will just make the recording so much more watchable and so much more engaging. Yes. So I think it's actually a really good balance that we've got at the moment.
I also think when we do get everyone together in that panel, and we've got like the themes coming through, like I've got a couple of things that have come up now that I want to throw in, because really what we want to do is provoke thought from people to actually start producing more shifts and the shifts that we want to retain in the organizations and industry, rather than like just having the changes that are being delivered to us in the quickest mode possible at the moment that may not actually sit well with people. Kind of if we can kind of get that more directed in what driven into what we really want, that will help make employment better. Yeah.
Well, anybody that thinks they've got all the answers to all of this, either it's it's just living in cloud cuckoo land. I mean, this is a multi-dimensional problem at massive breakneck speed where we've all been thrown into it. I think a lot of I was talking to Carve Portimore, who's you may remember again, Marilyn, ex-CI at one of the C-suite from BP, and he was saying this is and actually the startup that I'm working for, they are a very, very old established shipping firm, right? Who suddenly found they insist on everybody being in the office all the time. They suddenly found themselves digitized overnight, and they won't. And the thing is, they won't go back, but to the old ways. But it's all happened. Anybody that's thinks they've got the moral high ground here with all of the answers, even if it's the guys from ServiceNow who typically say they have got all the answers, just implement ServiceNow. That's the answer to every problem. Then it is wrong. Of course, Roddy Barnes does have all the answers because he's that clever.
What this
He's
has
that smart.
Everything is possible. A lot of stuff that people, was totally unthinkable that people could work from home in the aerospace industry and the security industries. And it turned out it was possible.
Absolutely.
Huge lesson is nothing is impossible.
It's a bit harder if you've got to serve skinny lattes to do it virtually. But yeah. Very good. Excellent stuff. Thanks for all the help, guys, and look forward to the next sessions.
Perfect.
Definitely.
Lovely. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much.
See you
Cheers.
later.
Thanks, David. Cheers. Cheers, Trace. Cheers. See you guys. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.